there's a lot going on in academic publishing. Whichever of these statistics you might want to pick out, it's clear that there's a terrific and increasing volume. And as an author, your publication will be competing with roughly 5 million other articles being published every year. And that means that you've got your work cut out for you if you want yours to stand out from the crowd. This pace of publication is increasing year on year. As you can see from this slide, the article growth is growing at around about 5% every single year. So the numbers just keep on going up and up. And speaking about numbers still, in terms of early career researchers, people like your good selves, early career researchers are making up an increasingly large portion of the published authorship every year. So hopefully this raft of statistics shows you that there's a lot of competition out there. Each one of you will want your work to be found, to be cited, to be talked about, to be shared. So let's have a look then at some of the ways in which we can try to ensure that that happens. So the first part then is all about how you can organise and arrange your article to give it the best chance of standing out, and making sure, moreover, that it's your name that's the name associated with that work. So let's start with a few simple but effective tips and tricks then for writing your article. And I'm not going to go into every single aspect of writing a paper, but just focus on a couple of the important ones when it comes to sort of owning and promoting yourself. So a good abstract then is instrumental. You need to make sure that your abstract clearly and concisely sums up what is new in your paper and why that is important. Be explicit. Don't just assume that other people will understand from the context why your findings are interesting. You've got to tell them. You need to consider a sentence that starts along the lines of, the reason these findings are important is X, Y, Z, and think about what you're going to put down there. After the abstract then, most readers are going to focus on the introduction and the conclusion, so it's worthwhile taking your time thinking about those and making sure that they really hit home. It's always a good idea with regards to the article as a whole, but certainly these sections, to ask your colleagues to proofread these, and to remember that people working in different areas and on other topics usually have the best feedback, because they bring a fresh perspective to things, so you can look at it with a slightly distanced set of eyes, if you like. Sharing research data is another good scientific practice, and it's key to making your findings reproducible and helping others then to build upon what you've found, what you've done. We as a company, we're supporting researchers to store, to share, to discover, and to use this data. For example, we're creating bidirectional links between articles and data sets, and we're launching journals that focus purely on data for that matter. In fact, there's going to be an article in one of my channels just next week, an author's update, which is all about how you can put these sort of non-traditional article types, these research elements as we call them, to work for you. So check that out when it's published. Charts and illustrations are often things that draw in a lot of attention in your article. So and they're there to help people kind of quickly understand a portion of what it is you're trying to say. So you want to make sure that your figures are clear, they convey your point effectively. If you need to, you may want to think about getting some professional help in terms of actually creating some really high quality figures and charts. So think about that. And finally, a point worth making, make sure that your paper is written in good English, or whichever language you're publishing in. If you're not a native speaker, then get a colleague, get a native speaker friend or colleague to proofread your article. Or if you need to, again, you can make use of professional language editing services. Okay, so another aspect then of preparing your article is ensuring that it'll be easily findable once it's published. Again, remember that your article is going to be hitting the sort of web at the same time as roughly 5 million others. So you need to think about how it is that readers are going to get to your paper, to find it and to read it. So search engine optimization, SEO, is something that will help to ensure that your article appears higher in the results returned by search engines like Google. And there are a few tips, few guidelines that will help getting you higher up in those search results. So one of them is to make sure that you use strong keywords in your titles, in your headings. Think about keywords that are both descriptive and also specific to this particular paper. And remember that search engines see websites differently, and they pay particular attention to headings and titles. You should also try to interlink your paper with other content on the web, for example, other papers, obviously by adding citations, but perhaps there are other things you can link to as well. So things like data repositories and other infrastructure that's relevant to your paper and to your area. And finally, make sure, and we'll come on to this point in a little bit in more in due course, that the authorship information is complete. It contains all the details of what people might use to search for somebody, i.e. yourself. So a couple of examples of search engine optimization now. So you can see here, we've got a link to a data repository with this particular paper. And then in this one, it's just an illustration and underlining the fact that when you're thinking about SEO, do make sure to pay attention to things like the captions of images and tables, and make sure you've got some strong keywords in there as well. So you may want to consider developing a graphical abstract for your paper as well. A visual or graphical abstract is a sort of visual summary of the main findings of your article that's placed up as part of your article on Science Direct or on other platforms, and it will turn up in online search results. And the point of a visual or graphical abstract is to help people to understand the key sort of thrust of your article at a glance. You can use it as a sort of promotional tool, for example, by sharing it on social media or sending it to an influential blogger or commentator in your field. And obviously, therefore, always make sure that you've got a link to your article encapsulated in that graphical abstract. We published a paper on this, an article in one of our blogs a wee while ago on this, and this is a sort of tongue-in-cheek meta graphical abstract. This is a graphical abstract about graphical abstract. So this kind of sums up the benefits for you. So you can Google Elsevier visual graphical abstracts, and you can come up with that paper. It's also included in the further reading at the end of the slides, which we'll share for you. So check that out, and you'll see a few more tips and tricks and instructions about how to come up with a good graphical abstract for your paper. So we talked then earlier about not only making sure that you are organizing your work properly, but also making sure that you own it, that you get the credit for what you've done, and ensuring that all of the different authors, if it's a multi-authored piece, they are recognized appropriately for whatever they've done with that paper. So first of all, obviously you want there to be no ambiguity about who you are, and that's important, especially if you're somebody who shares a common name with other potential researchers out there. So in that sense, the ORCID system, which you can see here, which stands for the Open Researcher and Contributor ID, will be rather useful. Basically, it's something that assigns a unique numerical identifier to your individual research profile, and therefore means that your work can't be confused with somebody else's. I've got a sort of quick showcase of searching for somebody called J. Smith, and you can see quite a number of J. Smiths, 17,000 of them. But this particular J. Smith, by making sure that he uses his ORCID ID, which you can see there, that makes sure that he is not going to be confused with another of the 17 and a bit thousand J. Smiths that are linked, indexed in Scopus. So the message here then is that you haven't already done so, make sure that you get and use an ORCID ID. And it's something that's being used for an increasing number of purposes nowadays. For example, one of the recent developments is that reviewing work is now also able to be kind of captured and indexed along your ORCID ID. So I mentioned earlier on about the point of actually trying to make sure that everybody who's contributed to a particular piece gets the recognition they deserve. We are operating now in a landscape of increasingly collaborative research, and therefore papers with multiple authors are often very common, and standard author lists don't necessarily adequately convey what and how individuals have contributed to the work in question. So similarly, if you're trying to secure funding or trying to move up the career ladder, quite simply, just being listed as an author may not be enough to give you the recognition, the sort of the recognition you need or deserve for that purpose. And that's where another nifty tool called Credit comes in. The Credit stands for Contributor Roles Taxonomy. This is a third-party service that any journal can use. And basically, it's aiming to reduce reduce authorship disputes and ensure that collaboration is facilitated by specifying and highlighting every author's individual contribution or contributions to a paper. So there are 14 distinct contribution types that authors can choose from that go into scholarly work, and these range from things like conceptualization, methodology, validation, software, writing, obviously, reviewing, and editing. All those are different flavors, if you like. So the idea is that if you're operating on a journal which has got credit in operation, then make sure you are kind of assessing and kind of choosing the right options for you and your co-authors. And again, there's a useful article which goes into more detail on credit in the further reading system. So I encourage you to take a look at that. In fact, the screen you can see here, the slide I got, is actually the homepage of that article. It's a snapshot from the homepage of all those who were involved. This is a credit statement for everybody who was involved in that article.